Hello, and welcome back to the Sleepy Historian. Find a comfortable place, let the sounds of the world around you fade away, and allow your mind to drift back with me. Tonight, we are not visiting a thundering battlefield or a grand throne room filled with proclamations. Instead, we are turning our attention to a quieter, more intimate affair, a wedding. But this was no ordinary union. This was a marriage that held the weight of a nation on its shoulders, a silken knot tying together two worlds that had been at odds for centuries, all while a new, strange world knocked at the door. Did you know that a single wedding procession in 17th century Japan was so lavish, so politically charged, that it revealed a nation's deepest anxieties about its own identity and its place in a rapidly changing world? It was a spectacle of power, a whisper of rebellion, and a source of profound, unspoken fear. So settle in, close your eyes if you wish, as we journey to the dawn of the Edo period to witness the Shogun's age of discovery wedding. And if you enjoy these late-night explorations of the past, please consider subscribing and leaving a comment. It helps our small corner of history grow. And now, let our story begin. Imagine Japan in the year 1620. The air itself feels different than it did just a generation before. The near-constant warfare of the Sengoku Jidai, the age of warring states, has finally ceased. The land is scarred but healing. A new order has been forged in fire and blood by a man of immense patience and cunning, Tokugawa Ieyasu. Though he is officially retired, his presence looms over the nation like a mountain. From his castle at Sampu, he is the puppet master, the grand architect of a peace designed to last for centuries. His son, Hidetada, is the official shogun in the new capital of Edo, a bustling, growing city of warriors and merchants. The Tokugawa clan, once just one of many ambitious warlord families, now rules all. Their power is absolute, or so they wish to believe. But there is another center of power in Japan, an older, more ethereal one. In the ancient city of Kyoto, the city of 1,000 temples, resides the emperor. In our story, this is Emperor Go-Mizunoo. He is young, cultured, a master of poetry and calligraphy. He is considered a living god, a direct descendant of the sun goddess Amaterasu. His position is one of immense spiritual and cultural significance. But in terms of real, practical power, he has none. The imperial court is a world of ancient ritual, of subtle language, of silk robes, and perfectly arranged flowers. It is a world that looks back, cherishing a golden age of aristocratic grace. The shogunate in Edo, with its samurai ethos of loyalty, steel, and pragmatism, looks forward, intent on control and stability. These two worlds, the Kyuge of the court and the Buke of the warrior class, exist in a delicate, often tense, balance. The shogun rules the country, but the emperor gives the shogun his legitimacy. It is a necessary fiction that both sides are forced to maintain. Into this carefully balanced world, a third element has arrived. It came on tall, imposing ships, the likes of which Japan had never seen. They called them the Kurofune, the Black Ships, and on them came the Nanban, the southern barbarians. These were the Portuguese and the Spanish men from the other side of the world, with pale skin, strange clothes, and even stranger ideas. They brought with them wondrous things, firearms that had revolutionized Japanese warfare, clocks that measured time in a new, mechanical way, and luxurious goods that the Japanese elite craved. They were a source of wealth and novel technology, but they brought something else, something far more disruptive. They brought a new god. Christianity, with its singular, absolute deity and its promise of a heavenly kingdom, was a direct challenge to the established order of Japan. It preached a loyalty higher than that to one's lord or even the shogun. For the Tokugawa, who were trying to build a society based on a rigid Confucian hierarchy of unquestioning obedience, this was poison. The missionaries, particularly the Jesuits, were intelligent, organized, and incredibly persuasive. They converted thousands, including some powerful daimyo or regional lords. The shogunate saw this not as a matter of faith, but as a political threat. They feared that these converted lords could become a fifth column, loyal to a foreign power like Spain or Portugal, who were even now colonizing vast swathes of the globe. The anxiety was palpable. Were these traders and priests the vanguard of an invasion? This question haunted the thoughts of Ieyasu and his advisors. The world was suddenly much larger and much more frightening than it had ever been before. It is in this crucible of old versus new, court versus warrior, and Japan versus the world that our wedding takes place. Tokugawa Ieyasu, in his final years, devises his masterstroke to secure his family's legacy. He decides that his granddaughter, a young girl named Masako, will marry the Emperor Go-Mizunoo. The plan was audacious, and to many, deeply offensive. The imperial line was sacred. Emperors traditionally took their consorts from a few select families of the highest courtly nobility, the Fujiwara clan. To marry the divine emperor to the daughter of a warrior family, no matter how powerful, was to stain that sacred lineage. It was a move of breathtaking arrogance, but Ieyasu understood power. By marrying his granddaughter to the emperor, any child they had would have Tokugawa blood. A future emperor would be his great-grandson. The Tokugawa clan would not just be the military rulers of Japan, they would be fused with its divine soul. It was the ultimate checkmate in the long game between Edo and Kyoto. The negotiations were difficult. The imperial court was horrified. They delayed, they prevaricated, they used every subtle tool of obstruction they possessed. But they had no army, they had no treasury to speak of, they had only their prestige, and prestige does not stop a column of determined samurai. Ieyasu died before he could see his plan come to fruition, but his son Hidetada pursued it with the same relentless determination. The court was eventually forced to concede. The engagement was announced. The bride was Tokugawa Masako, a child of the new warrior elite. The groom was Emperor Go-Mizunoo, the reluctant symbol of an ancient, fading world. Their union was not a love story, it was a political conquest. Let us try to imagine the two of them. Masako, a young woman raised in the Spartan, disciplined environment of a samurai household in Edo. She would have been taught martial arts for self-defense, educated in the practical matters of running a large estate, and imbued with the warrior-class values of duty and loyalty to her clan. Now she was being prepared to enter the labyrinthine world of the imperial court, a world of unspoken rules, of poetry contests, of incense-smelling ceremonies, a world where a misplaced word or an improperly folded sleeve could bring shame. She was a pawn in her family's grand ambition, a bridge between two cultures that viewed each other with suspicion. One can only imagine the anxiety she must have felt, the immense pressure to succeed in an alien environment, to represent her powerful family, and to win a place in a court that saw her as an outsider, a barbarian's daughter. And what of the groom, Emperor Go-Mizunoo? He was a man of great refinement and deep artistic sensibility. His world was one of beauty, of tradition, of connecting with the spirit of Japan through centuries of ritual. He was now being forced to marry a woman from a family he likely despised, the very people who had stripped his throne of all its temporal power. He was being forced to accept their blood into his divine line. For him, this marriage was not a celebration, it was a humiliation, a daily reminder of his own powerlessness. He was the golden bird in a gilded cage, and the shogun was now placing his own hawk in the cage with him. The personal anxieties of this young couple were a perfect mirror of the anxieties of the nation itself, a forced marriage between the old soul of Japan and its new, unyielding master. In the autumn of 1620, the time finally came. Masako was to travel from the shogun's castle in Edo to the imperial palace in Kyoto. And this is where the story moves from political maneuvering to a spectacle of almost unimaginable scale. The Shogun Hidetada was determined to use this procession not just to deliver a bride, but to deliver a message of overwhelming, indisputable power. This was not to be a simple wedding party. It was a military parade disguised as a nuptial journey. The procession stretched for miles. At its head were tens of thousands of samurai, drawn from the Tokugawa's most loyal vassal lords. They were clad in immaculate armor, their clan banners, or sashimono, fluttering from their backs like a forest of colorful flags. Squadrons of musketeers marched in perfect formation, their foreign weapons a clear symbol of the shogunate's modern military might. Behind the vanguard of warriors came an army of officials, servants, and courtiers. There were hundreds of porters carrying Masako's trousseau, a dowry so vast it was meant to beggar the imagination. Chests filled with thousands of silk kimonos, exquisite lacquerware boxes inlaid with gold and mother-of-pearl priceless ceramics, and sacks of rice and gold coins so numerous they were meant to symbolize the infinite wealth of the Tokugawa clan. This was not a gift, it was economic warfare. It was designed to show the impoverished court nobles in Kyoto that the shogunate could spend more on a single wedding than the entire imperial treasury contained. It was a display of wealth so profound it bordered on the vulgar, and that was precisely the point. And at the heart of this colossal river of humanity and wealth was the bride herself. Masako traveled in a magnificent keigo, a palanquin of black lacquer and gleaming gold fittings, its silk curtains drawn to shield her from the eyes of the common folk. She was a precious jewel being transported in an impregnable fortress. The journey took weeks, moving slowly along the Takedo Road, the great highway connecting the two capitals. At every post town, local daimyo were required to come out and pay their respects, bowing to the ground as the shogun's power flowed past them. The procession was a moving declaration of dominance, a reminder to every person in Japan of who was truly in charge. The ground itself must have trembled from the marching feet of so many thousands of men, a low, constant drumbeat announcing the arrival of a new era. Imagine the scene in Kyoto as this procession arrived. The court nobles, the Kyuja would have watched from the verandas of their elegant but decaying mansions. What they saw would have filled them with a mixture of awe and dread. They were men who valued subtlety, who believed true worth was found in a perfectly composed poem or the quiet appreciation of the moon. And now, their city was being invaded by this tidal wave of martial force and ostentatious wealth. It was a direct assault on their entire value system. The clatter of armor, the tramp of thousands of feet, the sheer noise and energy of it all would have been an affront to the tranquility of their ancient capital. They would see the samurai not as protectors, but as brutish jailers. They would see the lavish gifts not as a generous dowry, but as a golden chain being wrapped around their emperor's neck. This was not a celebration of a union. It was the final act of a conquest that had begun decades ago on the battlefield. The anxiety in Kyoto must have been a suffocating fog. When the wedding ceremony finally took place within the hallowed grounds of the imperial palace, the clash of worlds was complete. Imagine the scene: the shogun's samurai retainers, their heads shaved in the warrior style, their faces grim and weathered, standing stiffly in their formal kamishimo robes. They moved with purpose, their hands never far from the hilts of their two swords, and mingling with them, the court nobles, their faces painted white, their teeth blackened in the aristocratic fashion of the day. They wore voluminous, multi-layered silk robes of brilliant colors and moved with a practiced, almost liquid grace. They spoke in an archaic, highly poetic form of Japanese that the samurai could barely understand. It was two different species of Japanese elite, forced together in a single room, bound by a ceremony that both sides viewed with deeply conflicted emotions. It was the physical embodiment of the nation's identity crisis. And this internal clash, This tension between the old Japan and the new was amplified by the looming shadow of the outside world. The shogunate's anxiety about the Nanban, the Europeans, was a constant, humming background noise to all of this. The very muskets carried in the procession were a reminder of the foreign technology that had changed Japan forever. The shogunate's desire to control the imperial court was, in part, a desire to present a single, unified front to any potential foreign threat. They could not afford the internal division that a rebellious court might represent. The wedding, this grand, expensive, and intimidating affair, was a way of saying to the world, and to themselves, that Japan was united, that it spoke with one voice, the voice of the shogun. The anxiety about foreign incursion fueled the drive for domestic consolidation. The two were inextricably linked. In the years that followed, the marriage achieved its political goals. Masako gave birth to several children, including 2 princesses who would ascend to the throne, ensuring that Tokugawa blood flowed through the imperial line for generations. She became a powerful and respected figure at court, a skilled diplomat who navigated the treacherous waters between her husband's family and her father's. She was no longer just a pawn, but a queen in her own right, a patron of the arts who managed to bridge the cultural gap between the 2 worlds she inhabited. She became known as Tokugawa, a name of great honor, but the personal tensions remained. Emperor Go-Mizunoo never truly reconciled himself to the shogunate's dominance. He chafed under their constant surveillance and interference. In 1629, in an act of protest against the shogun's high-handedness in a court scandal, he did the only thing he could. He abdicated the throne without consulting Edo, a final, defiant gesture of independence. He spent the rest of his long life in retirement, dedicating himself to art, poetry, and landscape gardening, creating a world of beauty that he could control. And what of the other great anxiety, the one that came from across the sea? The shogunate's fears of foreign influence and colonization only grew. A few years after the wedding, a massive Christian rebellion at Shimabara was brutally crushed. This event confirmed the shogunate's worst fears. They decided that the risk of foreign contact was too great. They began to implement the policies that would become known as Sakoku, the chained country. Missionaries were expelled. Japanese Christians were forced to renounce their faith or face martyrdom. Travel abroad was forbidden. And foreign trade was restricted to a single, tiny, man-made island in Nagasaki Harbor, Dejima, where only the Dutch and Chinese were allowed to trade under tightly controlled conditions. Japan, which had been cautiously opening to the world, now slammed the door shut. The anxiety that had simmered beneath the surface of Masako's grand wedding procession had finally boiled over, leading to 2 centuries of self-imposed isolation. So we return to our question. Was this spectacular wedding a source of anxiety? Yes, it was a beautiful, shimmering manifestation of it. Beneath the gold lacquer and the rustle of silk was the deep-seated anxiety of a nation in transition. There was the anxiety of the old aristocracy, fearing its own irrelevance. There was the anxiety of the new warrior government, fearing that its hard-won peace was fragile, threatened from within by old loyalties, and from without by new, powerful empires. There was the personal anxiety of a young man and woman, their lives and bodies used as political tools in a game of dynastic survival. The grand procession of 1620 was a moment when all these fears were put on public display, cloaked in a performance of power and wealth. It was a wedding meant to solve a problem, to calm the nation's anxieties by creating a single, unchallengeable center of power. But in doing so, it revealed just how deep those anxieties truly ran, anxieties that would ultimately lead Japan to turn its back on the world for over 200 years. And now, our story comes to a close. The great procession has passed. The banners are furled, the echoes of marching feet have faded away. All that is left is the quiet of the Kyoto night, the scent of pine in the cool air, and the silent, watchful moon. The anxieties of the past have settled into the pages of history, leaving behind only a story for us to ponder as we drift off to sleep. Thank you for joining me here at the Sleepy Historian. I wish you a peaceful night and the sweetest of dreams.